Today we're talking about subtext, and we're lucky because there is only one thing that you ever need to know about subtext, and that is...
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
Okay, subtext is the bread and butter of good dialogue. Once you've got the basics down and your dialogue is reading smoothly, you're gonna want to make it deeper, more meaningful, with a bit more of that pizzazz. And subtext is how you do that. Hey you! Do you like knowledge? Do you like being sexy like me? Well, this is the most knowledge, most sexy book you can own. No, but really, if you found my writing and world building work valuable, then this book is for you. And I'm gonna be giving away a bunch of free copies of Volume 1 and Volume 2 at this year's 24-hour charity live stream. 4 p.m. EST, December 10th, so next week we are raising money for this thing. I don't know yet because we haven't chosen at the time of filming this video, but we will! Hey, Tim from the future here. You guys voted and you picked mental health. Now, we've already done mental health in a previous year, so I wanted to approach it from a slightly different angle. With COVID, lockdowns, and isolation, victims of domestic abuse have been locked in with their abusers, and there's been a real increase in suicide and elsewise. Safe Harbor is a small charity dedicated to giving those people a place to escape to. Shelter, safety, and food. In particular, I chose them because they also provide a place for male victims of domestic violence, something that is sorely lacking, even though they just as much need a place to go. I'll be matching donations.
She can beat me any day of the week, bro.
To the cause, and I hope you can join me. Part 1. What is subtext exactly? Some people will tell you, especially in screenwriting circles, that subtext is what people are really saying outside of their words. But those people are liars.
Reading between the lines.
Dialogue. Okay, that's not totally true. That is an example of subtext, but that's not all it is. Subtext is 1. Dynamics that characters may not be...
I change the font on this because this size, it's really hard to do this with limited space on the screen. There we go. Dynamics. May or may not be consciously aware of. So this would play really heavily with the Viceroy. Because a lot of the subtext for the Viceroy is either characters thinking that he's senile, or he just wants to pretend that he doesn't want to be involved in, like... It's not the political process, but it's like the thinking process, right? Because he's the guy who's just like, they're chilling there, they're trying to make a plan for something, and then he goes like, what about this? And then everyone looks at him like, wait, what the fuck? You're actually useful, dude? And then he'll spit out some sort of fucked up plan, right? Everyone will be like, whoa, dude, that's like five-head shit. I never would have thought of that. Holy shit. And then, you know, after that moment, whenever they try to reference back to him, he'll just say, I have no idea what you're talking about. You guys are... What kind of prank are you guys pulling on me? Like, this is some bullshit right here. And it gets to a point where characters just accept that, like, he just... There's something wrong, but they don't know what. But they just assume he's trolling. And this is like his attempt to get away from a position of being involved. He wants to be like an observer, right? He doesn't want to meddle or interfere or anything like that, because he doesn't want to get mixed, like he doesn't want to be perceived as mixing in with the Adventurers Guild and playing favorites. The reason why the public believes that the Viceroy is here is as a backup to Husai to, like, show that the Tree and the Adventurers Guild are still on the same page. Even though in reality they're not. And this is just going to show more and more how the thought process and, like, the feelings and like perceptions of the characters are shifted from the actual reality that it is. And people are kind of like delusional towards this, right? Because they just don't want the world to change. That's how most of the people in the tree feel. So that's one example. And then another one would be like with Hildebrandt, and the way that like after, or I guess before and after Hildebrandt falls in love with Husai, the way that she treats his armor, because she's his crafter. And it's just like such a subtle difference but it's like, if you pick up on it, you're like, oh shit. Like I said, it's supposed to be like the way Winry treats Ed's automail in Full Metal Alchemist. Like, love, reverence, respect, need. It's like her way of showing that her affection for Ed. Because she knows that he can't be there because he has a grander mission to do, right? And it's that whole anime-style love where it's like, you know the characters are in love, but the mission comes before that. And they never say anything, but you can just tell through, or assume through their actions and how they treat each other and talk to each other and interact with each other, that there's more going on. So this would be like big for the Viceroy and Hildebrandt.
Consciously aware of. 2, subtext is also thematic. Symbols, motifs, meanings that can be derived from the text, even if the characters aren't aware of it. 3,
thematic. Let's see here. Symbols, motifs, meanings that can be derived from text, even if characters aren't aware of it. Maybe this would be like the I think it's the QP, the strings, the tablet that they're looking for. And it can also be like, once you kind of know who the Warriors of Light are, but they're not revealing themselves yet, but you have a pretty damn good idea, and so does everyone else, but no one has pressed them, because if they are the Warriors of Light, there's a reason why they're doing what they're doing. And they're very, very important. And Husai knows that, you know, this isn't a subject that you can fuck with. Just like people knowing the name of the planet is Gaia, people being able to communicate despite using different methods of communication, not having the same equipment, and there's a couple of other ones, but I just can't remember off the top of my head. Now I'm blanking on it. Oh, the Monarch and, like, Torg and Zaid's death. Super important wording and structure for that to be, like, match those up. And it's a quarter of the way through the book, so it's like you may have even completely forgotten. Because I've had this happen when I'm, like, watching a movie or something and I forget what the first scene was because I'm always fucking high. And then I'm confused. And I'm like, wait, what? And then it goes back and references the original scene, and I'm like, oh, I'm retarded, I totally forgot about that! And then just blows your fucking mind, right? But anything to do with Gaia that's pushing people on an instinctual level towards a certain goal that's either, like, whatever their soul essentially desires. That's the greatest, like, instinctual push that Gaia has, is what are your greatest desires? Can those be manifest? And then it's just emphasized to the person, right? So it's kind of like you have a calling in life and everyone feels like they have a calling in life. But it does take a bit of self-discovery in order to, like, see that for what it is. I think it's like an instinctual driven, like, natural choice. It's like if you had no time to think. If someone asked you a question, you had to immediately answer. It's like you're not going to get the depth or, even probably the truth out of something like that. So it's about how far can you push like the characters' connections, especially with like Gaia. And with Husai, that's kind of what his entire character is built around and the reason why he's human. And that's also another thing is like Husai being human and having the like subtle language, like the language that I'm using to describe the different species themselves. And then when we get back to Husai, it's a very humanistic, elbows, knees, shoulders, neck, things that other creatures just don't have. And that's a huge subtext in and of itself as well. And so is like the concept of how magic works and the soulscape. So the theme for it is like consciousness is the true power of reality. And consciousness is all that can manifest and change reality. It just requires usually a physical vessel in order to do that.
Meanings that can be derived from the text, even if the characters aren't aware of it. 3. Subtext is character
information about the character that's implicitly revealed as they speak.
Information that's implicitly revealed as they speak. 4. It's when characters are keeping hidden.
Oh, this is a big one. Hidden emotions. Characters' internal world revealed in how they talk.
In thoughts or emotions, but unintentionally reveal something to us in how they talk. And yes, 5. It's when characters intentionally communicate or imply something without
implication. Saying something without it right. Sensations, passive aggressiveness, sugarcoating, euphemism, sarcasm. Then I go back to the Viceroy again because they're like they don't know what the hell's going on with that, but they're like he's doing something. He's trolling the fuck out of us.
outright saying it. Accusations, passive aggressiveness, sugarcoating, euphemism, sarcasm, you've all seen it, and yeah, you've all done it too. Subtext is reading between the lines in all of those ways, and because it is such a big topic, we're gonna narrow in specifically on subtext in dialogue today. So with those different types of subtext in mind, see if you can spot 3 of them in this passage from F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. And yes, I am determined to do it with a terrible accent. "Who is this Gatsby anyhow?" demanded Tom suddenly. "Some big bootlegger? Where'd you hear that?" I inquired. "Oh, I didn't hear it, I imagined it. A lot of these newly rich people are just big bootleggers, you know." "Not Gatsby," I said shortly. He was silent for a moment. The pebbles of the drive crunched under his feet. "Well, he certainly must have strained himself to get this menagerie together." A breeze stirred the grey haze of Daisy's fur collar. "At least they're more interesting than the people we know," she said with an effort. "You didn't look so interested." "Well, I was." Tom laughed and turned to me. "Did you notice Daisy's face when that girl asked her to put her under a cold shower?" "Lots of people come who haven't been invited," she said suddenly. "That girl hadn't been invited, they simply forced their way in and he's too polite to object." "I'd like to know who he is and what he does," insisted Tom. and I think I'll make a point of finding out. I can tell you right now, she answered. He owns some drugstores, a lot of drugstores. He built them up himself.
So, definitely for this one, I think. Assumption. And then this is just like the way that they're talking about something. Basically like spraying them the fuck out of the place, right? So that'd
Please
be my
rate
3
accent
picks.
in the comments, from good to excellent. We see that hidden thoughts and emotions subtext in how Daisy insists that Gatsby built up an empire of drugstores himself. Her quick defense of him comes from her trying to hide her feelings and past with Gatsby. She doesn't want Tom looking too deep. We see implication subtext when Tom says he certainly must have strained himself to scrape together this menagerie. He's using a euphemism here, menagerie, to say that these people are beneath him, a bunch of oddities, strange people. It's his old money snobbery talking, without outright saying it, of course. Thirdly, there's dynamic subtext to Nick and Gatsby's relationship. Nick immediately insists that Gatsby isn't a bootlegger, but he doesn't actually know that at this point, does he? This lets us in on how Nick idealizes Gatsby and wants us to think the best of him, even if he's not conscious of that bias. And other dialogue in The Great Gatsby is just packed full of thematic, ironic subtext. Tom admonishes Nick to not believe everything he hears, only for a couple of lines later for Daisy to insist, "We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true." All of it plays into this constant dissonance between the public image that people hold about you and what you're really like. The American dream being a public image you maintain, not acquire. When dialogue sucks, it is often because it lacks these kinds of subtext. So, I want to show you a book that does it badly. Part 2, I Am Sad, or Stories Without Subtext. So, something started to get on my nerves about Tom Rob Smith's Child 44, and I couldn't figure out what it was for the life of me, until about halfway through I realized that it had no subtext whatsoever. Subtext means that we're looking for what we're missing, what's about to happen, what's being foreshadowed, what's underneath what we're being told. We're actively engaged in figuring out the text, and that makes any reveals and developments just so much more compelling. But I wasn't being invited to actively engage in the story in Child 44. It was all being...
See, and that's one of my biggest problems I found, at least in writing chapter 1, that I'm very lacking in, is that dialogue feels forced and scenes don't coagulate together, nor do they feel like there's an established point to them. So that's like missing all of the responses from Husai. And like him being like, oh you know, like, because I was trying not to reveal anything, but it's like it should be his internal thoughts during chapter 1 of explaining exactly what the fuck is going on. 100-Year Quest, his connection to these people, why he cares about these people, saying, man, I haven't seen, like, where did this tape come from? This happened 50 years ago, you know? But instead of, like, saying outright, oh, this happened 50 years ago, it's like, I remember that day as if it was yesterday. And when somebody says something like, I remember that day like it was yesterday, you assume it happened a long time ago because they're saying that it still feels fresh in their mind. Which implies it's been a significant amount of time, and the memory should have faded at least a bit, but it's like, no, it's fucking sizzled into my mind, no matter how long it's been, right? But you don't actually say that. So that's a lot of the emotional subtext from Husai that I'm missing in chapter 1.
Handed to me, and that made it slow and boring. Child 44 is about a Soviet MGB officer who gets disgraced and loses all power and privilege when he finally has this confrontation with his wife. I married you because I was scared that if I rejected your advances, I'd be arrested. I was young, Leo, and you were powerful. The train pulled out.
Yeah, that is you can already tell off the bat, even for me, that's terrible dialogue. Because you can... No one would just outright say that. You know? It's like they'd make excuses. Most people would lie. Most people, you know... How would you say this? Like... You could say something like the dynamic, you know, the dynamic of the relationship has caused me to struggle because of fear. And it's like you can set that up without actually like saying that. And you could even leave that to like the end, right? And then it just assumes that one of them's in a dominant position and one of them's in a submissive position. But I could totally see why you would feel that way, even from that one line of being like, well, yeah, there's nothing there.
Leo watched it go, trying to digest what she had said, but she gave him no pause, speaking as though these words had been forming in her head over many years. Now, tapped, they were flowing freely. The problem with becoming powerless, as you are now, is that people start telling you the truth. You're not used to it. You've lived in a world protected by the fear you inspire. Circumstance is the glue between us. I have you, you have me. We don't have very much else. Leo had no reply. He was unprepared, outgunned, outspoken. In the past, he'd used his position to get better accommodation, better food. He hadn't imagined he'd used it to get a wife, too. Okay. There's two problems here that stick out to me personally. One, people don't usually say, I'm sad, or I'm angry. I can tell you, as someone who has listened to a lot of people unpack their problems in a suicide helpline, that they don't put it in these clear, stark terms a lot. You know, they liken their emotions to something else. It's like I'm lost and I don't know where to go. Or they talk about the thing that's making them angry. You know, I was at work today and a customer, she yelled at me. Especially when in these emotionally intense states, people tend to hyperfixate on a specific detail, or they talk really broadly, or they'll go on and on about this one thing that really frustrates them, even though there's a massive issue behind this that they're not getting into. In all cases, people rarely articulate their emotions or organize their thoughts by stating them outright in these almost neutral, descriptive ways, which is what is happening here. And two, what little subtext the dialogue initially had is spelled out in the prose in between. The dynamic of their relationship now, how she has kept in her emotions all this time, the themes about the blindness of people in power, the stuff that should be subtext. Mm-hmm. She's almost too aware of the story that she's in. This is something that I know I struggle with. It feels like when you're writing it, you're just exploring your character's mindset, but sometimes you're stripping the dialogue of subtext, making it kind of boring. So, let's rewrite this scene. You don't get it, do you? I was young, and you came in, you followed me around, flashing your badge, you wouldn't leave me alone. I thought I was gonna get... It doesn't matter. What was I meant to do? The train pulled out. Leo watched it go, trying to digest what she had said, but she gave him no pause. I know you think you're used to hearing the truth, but you're not. Nobody tells people like you the truth. I told you what you wanted to hear, but not anymore. We have to stick together, Leo. But I'm not going to keep lying for you. Leo had no reply. He was outgunned. In the past, he'd used his position to get better accommodation, better food. He hadn't imagined he'd used it to get a wife too. Now you'll notice I rewrote this opening line in more emotive, contextualized words, her describing what caused those feelings rather than outright stating them. I took away those lines that explained their relationship because that's subtext in the dialogue itself, and I put the very thematic lines more in terms of her own emotions. But I actually left this last part because, I don't know, I think it's fine. It is going through a character's thoughts, but it's not stripping the dialogue of subtext. So, the first thing to do, obviously, is to figure out what each of these different types of subtext might...
Subtext! Levi, welcome, welcome. How's it going? Okay, so let's see here. Let's see if we can break this down. I hate subtext because I'm autistic and just say what I mean to say all the time. I would like the opposite problem where I will fucking not say it no matter what. And I'll replace every instance of it trying to be said with fucking poetic words. Just to strip it of that, like, solidity. So it's like, especially with, like, cryogen, where it's like I am forcing myself to just say the exposition, right? And then we'll go back through when we're editing it, and then we're going to change it, right? But I think it's easier to get that out in the first edit, because most of the time I go back through it, and, like, I lose the subtext on myself, and I go, why did I do this? Then I change it, and then I realize why I had it the way it was, and then I change it back. And I do that fucking so much when I'm editing. So I, like, having it more in the front, or at least, like, even put it in brackets, be like, this is the direct subtext. When you're editing, remember to keep this subtext, you know, kind of idea. Like, that's another thing I should probably actually do. But, yeah. And it's like, I love Tarantino's dialogue because he never, like, most of the time, it's, like, those words are replaced with, like, motherfucker, fuck, god damn it, you know, something like that. Like, some sort of, like the way that I use poetry, he uses curses in the dialogue. It's actually fucking phenomenal the way that he ties it together. Connection, character, psychopath, hidden thoughts, I find you interesting, implication, you're not insane. Alright, let's see.
Be in any given scene. Sometimes I don't even think about them consciously and I miss out on using them. On the other hand, look for those scenes where you're spelling out that context too clearly. One way that I can often spot this is that there will be kind of a line summarizing the feelings underneath the scene. Like a father might be talking gently with his daughter, guiding her, and then the scene will end with it saying she was his rock, his everything, the thing he would always protect. And often that is information that came across in the dialogue, and you're just bringing out, going, "Hey, I hope you got this," and the reader's going, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah,
I did.
treating your
You don't
reader
need to tell me."
smart.
Quick fixes are letting characters articulate their feelings by likening it to something else, hyperfixation, or speaking too broadly before someone else helps them organize their thoughts. I found trying to write the same thing in fewer words is often a shortcut, really forces me to strip away some of the context and leave more of it to subtext. In stories that have characters unpacking their feelings and organizing their thoughts a lot, the subtext is going to be what you're foreshadowing and how they speak or act before they're able to fully unpack it. Looking for Alaska actually does this a fair bit if you're curious. Characters hyperfixate on small details following Alaska's death, spoiler, and how that hyperfixation and wording comes across foreshadows the anger and frustration that is revealed later on when they're able to articulate it. But, knowing all of this, the dialogue is often boring because it lacks subtext. It is still worth recognizing that there are, part 3, easier and harder types of subtext to incorporate.
Yup.
So we kind of have these 5 types. The dynamics, who is in charge, who looks up to who, what the characters think of one another. The thematic, the deeper messages of the story. Character, their flaws, strengths, vulnerabilities, issues, hidden emotions or thoughts. A character's internal world that they aren't openly communicating. And implication, a character communicating something without stating it explicitly. Now, these last 2 types, hidden emotion and...
Well, I was just thinking, one of the great implications is, like, for instance, if I was, like, in the conversation between Hildebrandt and Husai, which is one of the most important conversations in the entire book, he's asking her questions like, do you find these things odd? Now, if I said, do you find these things odd, that would be breaking the subtext, right? And it's like he's just trying to test her with these things. So he'd be like, what do you think, or have you ever met someone that you've asked what the name of our planet is, and they haven't given you the same answer? Versus something like, every time I ask, is it worth it to think about Grice's maxims for this? Not sure about that one, Levi. I have no idea. I am uneducated. I am a plebling. Oh, how people communicate effectively in conversations. Well, you know, I'm just gonna straight up copy and paste this in here as like a little blurb. Because that seems like that's actually some pretty good information right there. Yes, there's a couple of rules, and we often communicate a lot by breaking those rules. Emphasizes truthfulness. It encourages speakers to only say what they believe to be true and have the evidence to support their claims. No one ever says that. Even I make shit up. I lie about shit. I'm misinformed. But I try to be, like, aware of that, right? But you're not always. The word is named Tellus. We figured that out. Well, it's actually Gaia, but it's like the difference between saying, like, if you ever found a person that hasn't answered, like, what, like, have you ever found a person that you ask what the planet's name is and you haven't gotten the same answer? Versus, if you ask someone what the name of the planet is, they'll always respond Gaia. Like, if I say the weather today could have been better, I haven't said the weather was bad, but the fact I'm commenting on it still says something. Exactly, like it was nice, but it was a little bit cloudy. Or, it was nice, but it was windy. Right? So it's literally using what's not said to communicate the information.
And implication are really easy to fit into dialogue because they slot right into scenes that are full of character conflict. Take this moment from the sci-fi series Torchwood, where an alien has possessed a girl's body and one character, Gwen, feels like they're not doing enough to help her. Now, the writers could have written the exchange like this. Gwen, what are we doing having Chinese while a girl fights for her life? Jack, what are we meant to do? Constantly worry? You're new here. You're too wrapped up in this. We can't lose sleep over every time we think we could do a tiny bit more. Take a breath, or it'll get annoying. Now, it'd actually be fine if Jack said that. It'd even be in line with his character in some ways. But, instead, the writers had Jack say,
actually, while we've been eating, the computers have been running a full bioscan on Karis, profiling her blood, metabolism, organs, skin, the works, so we can see what effect the alien's having on her. They've also been taking samples of the air in the cell so we can analyze any changes in the environment around her. Now, is that enough? Do you want more?
There's two bits of subtext here. There's the implication. Jack is saying, you're new here, Gwen. You're too wrapped up in this. But he softens it for her. And there's the hidden emotion. He's kind of frustrated with Gwen, but he's being quite diplomatic about it. And I really do recommend Torchwood, by the way. All 3 seasons are fantastic, especially if you want a great example of dialogue writing. But we often focus so much on these last 2 types of subtext that we don't know how to fit subtext into scenes without as much direct character conflict. But again, have a listen to the scene from Torchwood.
There you go. I can taste it.
Estrogen. Definitely estrogen. You take the pill, flush it away, and enters a water cycle. Feminizes the fish. Goes all the way up into the sky, then falls all the way back down onto me. Contraceptives in the rain. Love this planet. Still, at least I won't get pregnant. Never doing that again. How's it going?
Nothing yet. It's going to connect. I've just got to feel it.
Then hurry up and feel it. Freezing my arse off here.
I can't just flick a switch. It's more like access. It grants me access.
Whatever that means.
It's like, oh.
Position.
If I get punched again, I'm punching it right back.
Just concentrate. Susie.
Now, the characters here are working together to resurrect a murder victim and interrogate them, but we get a lot more information in how they talk. We understand the dynamic that Jack is the leader. He's the first to speak, he tells others to get into position, and he's clearly in control, at ease. Without ever being super obvious about it, there's no yes sirs, and he's not even giving direct orders. But we also know that Owen is short with others and dismissive of what he doesn't understand, which is character subtext. And lastly, a major theme of Torchwood is that we should explore our sexuality and not feel bad about it. Jack talking so openly about this builds into that messaging, just under the surface. Really
Aloha,
subtle.
Talk
Now, the writers could have
Essentia!
had
How's
the
it
character-
going? How are you today? Welcome. Sorry about that. These. Can you just put these inside of my helmet for now? It'll be a reminder in the background if the chair is ever not in the way of it. Yeah, there you go. Everyone can understand. Recover from your today's adventure. Oh yeah. Great storyteller. I mean, that's what everyone tells me. I mean, I'm like, okay. I mean, I tend to listen to what other people say. Because, you know, I'm a terrible judge for myself. I'm a terrible critic. Love the unpacking. Why, thank you. That was an egg salad moment. As long as this crinkling stops. Get that away from the fucking mic. That might be crinkling in the background for, like, love you, Talk. Thank you, Essentia. I love you, too. That's so cool to have, like minds like this, you know what I mean? See you. Have a good one. Alright. I had no idea she was just a voice. Wait, you didn't know? You didn't know that? That she's just, like, fake? That's what's so good about it. Is she's literally the first... she was the first, right? Like, or she was, like, the first popular one, the one that just, like, popped off?
Just go, alright, sit up. We don't have long. You got the glove? How long has she been dead? Oh, I don't know, 2 hours? I'll clear the police. But they didn't do that, did they? They thought about the dynamics, the themes, and character that they could communicate in this dialogue, even without a lot of direct conflict. You can and should absolutely use implication and hidden thoughts and emotions in these scenes with less direct character conflict, especially because characters will have emotions lingering from past scenes that they
They're just not as popular, I don't think, Levi, but I could be wrong about their popularity. I'm like, why does my head hurt? And I was like, oh, I forgot to take my ponytail out. So I can't rest my head properly. There we go. Okay, much better. But yeah, I mean, like, not just, like, inside of Japan, but, like, a worldwide phenomena, right? Love some Talkbox. Yeah, not super popular, but not uncommon across time. Yeah.
haven't resolved yet that carry over into how they speak in scenes later on. But don't forget to account for dynamics, themes, and character, all totally valid forms of subtext that make reading more interesting. But how about we finally get down to business? Part 4, some specific techniques. The one we all know, that we're all familiar with, is to do with contradictions, especially between body language and dialogue, because I'm fine. Stop asking if I'm fine in the comments. I am fine. I am smiling. Ah. She relaxes and pushes my bangs from my face. What did he do? He didn't do anything. Maya, I don't know what happened. I stare at the rusted brown mixing with bright red on my fingertips. In this passage, Maya insists that she doesn't know what happened, but the way that she avoids her mother's gaze tells us that she does, and she's just not ready.
What I find messed up about Vocaloids, and I think they're awesome, but people are paying full concert ticket prices to see them. That blows my mind. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you can't fault them for trying, and if people are willing to pay it, that's the reason why, guys, in 5 years, we're going to have $150 video games. Like, we're not talking $150 deluxe, we're talking base game, $150, deluxe, everything, $225, $250. Like, we are headed in that direction, because people will, they will charge you what you are willing to pay. And until there's like a major pushback on it, they're going to keep raising the prices. And that's generally how prices get raised. Is they do it slowly in increments to the point that like years later you're like, how the fuck is pizza $4 a slice? The fuck you mean it's $4 a slice? That slice is like 1.5 inches. The fuck is wrong with you? Total combination of shrinkflation and inflation.
Ready to talk about it. The body gives a secondary meaning to the dialogue. This most often crops up when you have a character who wants to hide what they're feeling, but I found it really useful in 2 other slightly different situations as well. One, like we discussed before with Looking for Alaska, we can use it to foreshadow a character's emotions before they come out in dialogue. When characters are working themselves up to say something, or their mind is elsewhere, distracted, they're not necessarily hiding how they're feeling, but they're clearly dwelling on something else, or unable...
It's like the entirety of chapter 1 completely misses this point when I wrote it. Which is, again, like, probably the main reason why I looked at it and said, this is fucking garbo. I got the scenes down, but there's no feeling to them, right? They're just... Because the entire point of the first draft was get the character introductions down, get the scenes down. That was it. And I haven't edited it since November. So it's pretty fucking bad. Especially, like, the progress that we've seen within the last, like, 4 months or so. And, like, what I'm writing now versus what I was writing then. And just the depth of my ability to get things onto the paper.
To articulate it. And 2, when their body language doesn't exactly contradict what they're saying, but it indicates a more or less intense version of what they're saying. Someone holding in their anger or their tears, or feigning outrage. Another type of contradiction might be when they say something that doesn't match their normal speech pattern. Tell the hand what happened at Shearer. Joss nodded. If it pleases His Grace. His Grace is hunting across the Blackwater, Ned said. Now, Ned is not the sort of person to normally interrupt others, but he does here, and despite him just informing someone that the king is out hunting, an innocuous statement on its own, he's very clearly snapping. Both of these things together give us the subtext that Ned is uncomfortable acting for the king or ever being addressed as His Grace. In my book, there's a character who basically never raises her voice, she never interrupts, so the one time that she does that, it tells us subtext.
Well, that's kind of like one of the Warriors of Light, right? The guy who uses the golem magic, and he doesn't talk. He only uses the puppets to talk. So it's like, if he ever talks, that is like a huge fucking moment, right? And you can build that up with certain characters, right? Like the way, like, you're kind of building up, like, what you're expecting, like what I'm hoping to do with like the conversation between Husai and Hildebrand, is this like complete rejection scene where you're expecting Husai to say something about how he feels about Hildebrand, and Hildebrand to basically laugh in his face and say exactly what she thinks about him, which is that she thinks he's a poser who's trying to relive his glory days, and he's doing it at the expense of what could possibly be the beginning of another great war. in a complete time of strife when he needs to be the strongest ruler in the tree, he's out here fucking around looking for dragons. It's just ridiculous to her. And that's how she's always come across. But this sit down and conversation completely changes her perspective towards him to the point she falls in love with him because she had him completely wrong. And it's like, you know, like a 3-hour conversation kind of thing. It's just like completely extended understanding and exposition of the world and how people interact with it, right? And the knowledge that people have that they probably shouldn't have, the way that people communicate and stuff. In fact, if he's saying, "Well, I'm an octopi, you're an avian," doesn't, you know, how can we communicate so easily? It's like, I can't even tell you the sounds that you're making. It's all in your head kind of idea. And just getting her to think about this kind of shatters the boundary and the barrier that Gaia has put up. And this is the reason why Usai knows that he can't talk about this. And it just completely breaks down Hildebrand. And she, like, realizes basically the truth about the world. And it's like the veil is ripped from her eyes. And then she sees the truth. And she's like, holy fuck, okay. Well, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And she's already abandoned being an adventurer. Now she's just a crafter. But now she's even questioning that. And then Husai basically pumps her up and is like, yo, your shit's amazing. What you talking about? And, you know, that's their great bonding moment. And then from there, they just keep getting closer and closer and closer.
How important what she's saying is to her, something of the underlying emotions. Contradicting her normal speech patterns gives the line a deeper meaning that another character speaking in the same way wouldn't have. A really common one is interrupting or rambling or forgetting what they're saying when they normally wouldn't. Last video we talked about characters playing different roles in a conversation. You know, the skeptic, the emotional one, the cold hard
Didn't
facts.
watch that one.
Changing that pattern, say the emotional one suddenly goes to the cold hard facts first. Well, that gives subtext. That Torchwood example from before is the same. Jack's tone is condescending where he normally wouldn't be, and that gives us some subtext about their dynamic as characters. Lastly, you can also have a disproportionate response to something. Exploding in anger, or being ecstatic, or breaking down when what happened doesn't really demand that response. The famous strudel scene in Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds is just a masterclass in all of this type of subtext. Those agendas
so
with
good.
characters at each other's throats in a really subtle way. There's tons of hidden emotion and implication and little kinks in speech patterns that tell us so much about the characters and what's really going on. And it all comes through in dialogue. Now, you've probably noticed...
Feigning. Feigning ignorance. I can't believe he didn't say that, because that's like one of the biggest keys to that scene is the idea of feigning ignorance. You know that they're on to each other, but they're not saying that they're on to each other because they're both pretending. Very, very important.
That these techniques more easily fit into implication and hidden emotion rather than theme, dynamic, and character. And to that, all I'll say is watch Hannibal, because that show does subtext perhaps better than anything else I've ever seen. Some people will say that you should just create more conflict for the scene, but personally I'm wary of that advice because I want all of my conflict to really fit into the wider arcs of the story, and it's really easy to just create filler, pointless dialogue. With that said, agendas are important, that characters want different things in scenes, but that can be really subtle, like how in that Torchwood scene, Owen wants to get out of the rain. In our last video on dialogue, we talked about the contrasting role characters play and the focus they have, and those things can really come into conflict in a lot more subtle ways without characters being directly at each other's throats. And I think a more foolproof way of creating more subtext is...
And that's kind of like one thing we have is like the idea of characters that are at odds with each other on a small scale, that when there are no other problems, that's their only problem, but as soon as another problem comes into effect, their little squabble instantly disappears, right? And it's like sometimes it's banter, sometimes it's just characters that are calling each other out because, like, you know, this character thinks this guy's an asshole, this guy thinks this guy's an asshole, but they're both just assholes, so it's like, well, fuck it, who cares, right? Well, you did this, well, who cares, you did that. Well, I only did that because you did that. Why would you only do something if someone else did it?
Rewording and restructuring the conversation that's already there to emphasize those dynamics, the character, the themes, more than just creating more conflict. But there is one type of subtext that stands out as more difficult than the rest, and it's something that I struggle with, and that is Part 5, Thematic Subtext. You know how at the end of every kids show, the characters get together and they go,
The real bad place was the friends we made along the way.
No.
that's when subtext becomes text, and they do it in kids shows because kids aren't exactly the smartest cookies in the toolbox. But how do you do it? Arula Ratnakar's novella Submergence is all about consciousness and personhood and what it means to live in a subjective existence. So there's a lot of themes bouncing around. Read it below, there's a link, it's great. And most of the story is dialogue. But the reason it works is because when the characters talk, they're not really talking in ways that feel self-aware of the story they're in, like it did in Child 44. They're not summarizing the lessons that might be taken from the plot. Noor frowns. We can't continue doing this. P-Mary is intelligent. A single sponge contains more synapses than we can even fully comprehend. We have to tell everyone. They look at one another before turning to her. One man sighs. Look, Noor, right? We already know about this. Somebody discovered this before you. Actually, we've known about this almost since we discovered the sponge. In fact, it is a crucial part to how we treat the diseases. They're instead arguing or processing their emotions in haphazard ways, leaving the themes as subtext. Something we conclude from who the story has made us empathize with, what it's made us feel or see as right and wrong. The truth is, readers are pretty damn smart. I mean, you are, and you'll pick up on themes if authors just let you. They don't need to spell it out, right? Remember that passage from Child 44 about power and blindness and truth? It sounded weird because the characters never talked like that before, and suddenly they were in these grand abstract ideas. Thematic dialogue often ends up being really heady, with characters using expressions and words that are clinical or philosophical that they haven't really used throughout the rest of the story, and it's clearly the author stepping in and pulling the strings just a little bit too much. And I say that as someone who is very guilty of it.
True!
So look out for characters changing speech patterns to fit the themes. And I mean, a lot of the time, introspective writing is just way better suited to characters reflecting on what they've learned. I mean, when we learn things and grow as people, it's this slow, nebulous web of weird thoughts that only kind of piece together into a weird picture in our head, and it's very hard to put it into words exactly, to summarize it in a single sentence, because what we know and what our experiences were and our personal biases are all mixed together in a big, timey-wimey soup of theme. And so, here we are. If this video, or the one we did before on dialogue, or the one
Never
on
watched
fight
that
scenes,
one.
or just my work more broadly, has been helpful to you in
True.
writing and world building, then this book is for you, and you can get it right now or order it for Christmas or something at all the links down below. Or for a writer friend you know, because this is a codified version of all of the writing and world building discussions we've
I have to
since
read
Volume
something.
1, with a bunch of exclusive content, way more depth and detail, and it's just way easier to study and reference than a bunch of videos. I mean, the first volume has
that
sold
book
over
is for me, why'd I have to
35,000
pay for
copies
it?
alone, but you can just
Levi, that's a very, very valid question. Because people need money.
get whichever book has the topics you want. You know, exposition, magic systems, place names, fight scenes, pacing, Dark Lords, or you can just get both of them, you know? Now, and I cannot understate this, leaving a review on Amazon helps immensely. The reason that Volume 1 continues to sell on its own is that so many people left reviews. It just kept on pushing it up in the algorithm. So thank you to those who did, and thank you if you leave one for this. But yeah, links below, this is for you, thanks for making this happen. But let's summarize the major themes of this video with absolutely no subtext.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all
1. When looking to incorporate subtext, consider the dynamics between your characters, the themes, the character, hidden thoughts or emotions, and implication.
Check.
2. Subtext gets the reader to actively engage with your story because they're looking for what they're missing, foreshadowing and hidden meanings. This makes any reveals and developments in the plot more compelling.
True.
3. People communicate their feelings by likening them to other things, describing the events that sparked their emotions, and they often hyperfixate or speak broadly about the issue before they're ever able to articulate their thoughts. 4. Don't accidentally dispel your subtext by spelling it out under the guise of going through your character's thoughts. 5. Hidden emotions and implication are easier to use in scenes packed full of character conflict, but dynamics, themes, and character can easily enrich a scene with less of that direct conflict. 6. Contradictions help deliver subtext. Contradictions between dialogue and body language, dialogue and speech patterns or tone, and disproportionate responses. 7. Thematic subtext is hard, and it tends to become heavy-handed when characters start using heady, clinical, philosophical wording outside of their normal speech patterns, or they say things without any real character context. Introspective prose is often better suited for thematic exploration. 8. Buy my book, the most important point. Stay nerdy, and I will see you when you have this book. I will come to your house and shake your hand.
True. All right. So I guess we need to watch the dialogue one, but